What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to start the reassembly on the 59 CJ5 F-head. As you can see, this is the color it's going to be. This is Detroit Diesel Alpine Green. This is just a test coat, just to show the customer what it's going to look like. It's got to grind off the gasket surfaces and stuff like that. It was just kind of a rough coat. But anyway, so the first thing, so the assembly is going to be pretty long. We had the tear down, the inspection part. Now we're going to have the rebuild part. So we're going to start off by honing out the cylinders. Oh yeah, we did the inspection and measuring. So now we're going to hone out the cylinders. We're going to do a valve lapping job. We got new valves, but you still want to lap them to have the new valves kind of seat into the seats real good. Yeah, so what else we can do today? We'll probably, then after that we're gonna have to clean. I'm gonna clean the block off camera. I gotta clean out the oil galleys again and all that stuff, because honing makes a mess, valve lapping makes a mess, and we just want to give it another thorough cleaning before we start the assembly. So the assembly, we'll start off with the camshaft. We'll put the tappets and the camshaft in, crankshaft, and then work our way up. So it's going to be a pretty lengthy series. I'm going to try to be as in depth as possible. So let's get started. So I'm going to all right, so I already started honing, but this one is as it was found. This is number 4. So you can kind of see there's not much cross hatching left in there. Got a little bit of corrosion. And same thing with number 3. Got some glazing going on. And if you look down at the bottom, you'll see that's the original, my finger kind of in the angle, that's where there's no wear from the piston stopping right there. So you can kind of see what the original finish looks like. There's still cross hatching in there. It's kind of that dull smooth finish, sort of smooth, sort of rough finish. That's what we're gonna basically do. The hone I'm going to use is a standard blade hone. So I'll touch on the difference between blade and ball hones. Let me change the camera. So it's a blade hone. It's a 220 grit. This is good for glaze breaking, and you can and will get cross hatching out of it. It's worn pretty quickly. I just don't think the quality's still there with these like they used to be. I remember getting a couple engines worth of honing out of one of these, and I've only done 2 cylinders and it's already halfway worn out. But anyway, so we measured our bores and everything. We have a slight taper. Like always, it's not going to be perfectly cylindrical with some wear on it. And if we used one of the ball hones, that's the one with all the ball stones all around it on basically, I don't know, it just looks like a beehive kind of, but with the ceramic balls all around it. If we used one of those, that's going to give us a good crosshatch pattern, but that's also going to conform to the taper and make the taper worse. So if that kind of makes any sense, this blade hone is going to keep one shape, and because anytime you hone, you remove a little bit of material. So we're gonna lose a very minimal amount of material, but it still adds up. So if we had, say, 2 10,000ths worth of bore taper or 3 10,000ths worth of bore taper, we put that ball hone in there, where we might have 5 or 6 10,000ths of taper, because it's making it worse. Versus using one of these, you're actually going to remove taper, because it's going to basically conform to the high spot and match it to the low. So, but not a lot. We're not boring cylinders, we're just honing it. So we're just moving a very small amount of material and basically breaking the glaze, that real smooth finish where, the metal's been, the bore's been hot, it's glazed, so we're going to break that glaze, get a little bit of cross hatching in there, and give those cast iron rings something nice to adhere to. So All right, so before we start honing, we're gonna go ahead and lather the bore up. It should already be cleaned and everything. I used to use diesel fuel a lot for the first pass. Diesel fuel, you know, it's not as it's not much of a lubricant, so it helps cut a little bit better. But with these diesel prices, it's just yeah, it's just ignorant. But anyway, I'm using automatic transmission fluid on a paper towel. You can see how much dirt we're getting up. So you can just brake clean out the cylinders, wipe them down a few times, and then just get a little lather of ATF. So on my drill, I'll just put it on low speed and pull the trigger down all the way. So we just maintain that constant speed. And then just get it set in here. And then you're gonna count to say 20. So I'm gonna do 20 passes, stop, clean it out, inspect it, and then we'll just keep going until we get the ridge removed, and then we got that nice cross hatching pattern. So, but you got to remember to stop. You know, if you do too much, you can't undo it. So make sure it's nice and straight. We're gonna do 20 passes, and then I'll throw some oil in there, and we'll start using engine oil. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So, still got a long ways to go. On there, we just broke the glaze, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe it out. I'll go ahead and grab the brake clean. You can see how much dirt's on my arm there. A lot of that is just media from the stone. So that's why it's important we clean the engine again. Yeah, we still got a heavy glaze in there. So we're gonna throw some oil in there. Just gonna put some along the cylinder walls. Come on. There we go. Probably count to 20 again. All right. Wipe it out again. Do a quick inspection. Yeah, we're still gonna have to keep going. It's not good enough yet. So put some more oil in there. Alright, you can see I went a little bit longer that time. Probably one more time. Should do it. Not going to use so much oil this time. Get a little bit more of a cut. Hopefully you can see that better. Honing's all done. Came out pretty good. But we're going to go ahead and it's got one last valve seat to lap. Got some valve lapping compound on the new exhaust valve. One thing I did forget to check during the inspection is your valve guide wear. These are probably borderline okay, I'd say, just from feel of them. They're pretty expensive to replace. It's not something I'm equipped to do here. Got to do some machining and all that stuff. They'll be okay to reuse. But so normally you just use one of those suction cup valve lappers. Should have one somewhere right here. So use one of these valve lapping tools. Don't really need it because we're not, if we were using old valves we'd use it because it's a little bit more aggressive, but we're just basically just going back and forth. I'm pinching the bottom of the valve. I'm just going to go back and forth. We'll see if it'll even stick. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's kind of a hit or miss with sticking on these. It's just they're a weird size. I'll try a smaller one. Yeah, it's just being a pain. But anyway, you get the idea. I think I did a video on this last year or so. Pedal lap valves. Now the camera's not wanting to stay up. There we go. Yeah, that should be good. That paint's gonna come off. I don't know how that overspray got in there, but it did. So here you can see the valve seat. So we just roughened it up a little bit. So now we got a good mating surface. These valves are going to get cleaned again before reassembly. You can see that little bit of groove that wore in there. That's just kind of the wear pattern of it. So we are good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and take this thing outside, clean it real good again, all in the oil galleries, the bores, the combustion chambers, everything. So we don't want any valve lapping compound. We don't want any honing stone material in there. We don't want any dirt. We don't want anything. So, all right, when I check back in, we'll start installing the camshaft. All right, so the first thing we're gonna start on is putting the tappets in. Got the number one exhaust tappet. Gonna put some assembly lube on there. And I'm gonna drop the assembly lube right into some oil. Wouldn't have it any other way. Wanted to start filming earlier, but there was a real bad storm. Couldn't hear anything. So, all right, got that in. Just make sure it slides good. And do the same thing with the number one intake. Just a little bit. We want to save this for the main bearings and the connecting rod bearings the most. because we'll flood these with oil later on. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and install all the other ones. It's the same thing. Just remember, it's exhaust, intake, intake, exhaust, exhaust, intake, intake, exhaust. So, alright, check in a minute. Alright, so now we're going to install the cam. Going to generously lube all the lobes, the cam bearing mating surface, and the journals that it rides on. And we'll go ahead and install it. I already put a new cam bearing in, so you just use a cam bearing driver. A seal and race driver will work too, as long as it's soft metal, you know, either a plastic one or an aluminum one. Just drive it in, you can see it here, nice and shiny. So I'm gonna go ahead and lube it up off camera. We'll go ahead and install it. Alright, so be real careful. You don't want to nick the bearing, and you don't want to really nick the journals. And also, one thing I forgot to mention is make sure, if you replace the cam freeze plug back here, and make sure that it's replaced before you install the cam. So, all right, we're good to go. So now we're gonna go ahead and fasten the thrust plate. Go ahead and adjust the camera for that, and then we'll move on to the crankshaft. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and put the front cover gasket on. Got some gasket shellac on there. Make sure your front oil galley plug is in, because once you put this on, if you forgot that, you're going to be needing a replacement. So, got that on there pretty good. We're going to do a double coat of it, just because we don't want this to leak. This will fight us if it leaks. And the whole front engine, the cam's got to come out, or the cam gear at least, and all that, if it does leak. So then we just put an emphasis on the bottom here. There's really no oil passing through here, other than your oil sprayer to lubricate the cam gear, but still running kind of low on this stuff. It's getting hard to find. There we go. Now it's all over my fingers. We got the front cover. Always forget how it goes on. Alright, so you're going to install here, here, and these two. These are going to be, the timing cover are going to go through these holes. So actually, these three, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, and then these are going to be for the cam thrust plate. So go ahead and throw these on. There's no torque spec in the book, so just get them, you know, snug. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and install the cam. Got it all lathered up in assembly lube. I lubed up all the journals and the new cam bearing and the lobes. Make sure you're pretty generous with everything. Be careful not to nick up the bearing too bad. If you have to, just grab the back of the cam and fish it through. We're going to just have to turn our thrust plate just a tad to get it in the groove. Actually, might be 180 out. Hold on. There we go. Normally you install the cam without the gear, but we're reusing this original gear. Aftermarkets have been hard to find and questionable quality, and there's no reason not to reuse this one. It looks good. Oh, thrust plate's hung on the bolt. That's why it's not going in. It's kind of hard to see with the gear in the way. There we go. Alright, so now our thrust plate's in. Now because I'm probably going to just pause the video. I'm running as usual low on everything. Right here I got the timing gear oil jet installed. Just got to tighten it up, and this one's got the revised 40 thousandths orifice, the smaller orifice. I think it was 70 and 40. The 70 was shown to not produce a lot of oil pressure, so it would make the #1 main bearing starve of oil. So they went to a smaller orifice, and the hole, you want it to face the gear here, so when it's spinning around, it's lubricating the crank gear and the cam gear. So I'm going to go ahead and install our thrust plate bolts. We'll torque them down, and then we'll check camshaft end play. Alright, so we're going to check camshaft end play. It's got it here on the gear, on a mag base dial indicator. We're looking between 4 and 7 thousandths of end play. So I'm going to put just got a pry bar here. I'm just going to put it on the middle main bearing boss and one of the cam lobes. It just needs very light pressure. And just going to put pressure on it. Go back and forth, make sure the dial indicator zeroes back out. And we're good. So, a little tight, we're right at 4 thousandths. So there's no sense in pulling it all apart, reshimming it, it's good to go. Good and tight. So, I'll go ahead and break this all down, and then we're gonna move to the crankshaft install. Alright, so I got main bearings 2 and 3 installed, the shells. The #1 is the thrust bearing. It only goes in one way, just like the rest of the lowers. But when we go to do the cap, it's possible to install it backwards. So when you install the bottom, just make sure you see this thin oil groove here. That's going to face the front on the main cap. So we're going to put a little bit of oil on here because we're going to have to, no, we'll go ahead and put assembly lube in it. We'll put the crank in without the caps, and we won't roll it. Then we'll install the bearings and the caps, and then torque it down, put plasti-gauge on there, and then torque down the caps, and then we'll check our bearing clearances with the plasti-gauge. So that way, by putting the assembly lube on, we're gonna simulate a little bit of oil clearance and then also eliminate having to take the crank out. So, just saving a little step. So go ahead and lather this thing up with assembly lube. That was probably a little too much. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and grab the crank. One thing, if you noticed in the last scene, the dowel pin was missing. I caught it right after I stopped the video. So I got a spare F-head. I went ahead and robbed one out of a cap. I couldn't get him out of the main, so saved the day on that. And the reason for these dowel pins is to keep the bearings from spinning. So, you know, if I wouldn't have caught that, the bearing would have had a potential to spin, and then it'd be spinning with the crankshaft and just destroy everything. So we're back on track. I'm gonna go ahead and throw the crank in there. Make sure you go ahead and put in your remain seal, pre-oil it and everything. Stick it down in there good. You don't want to put it in dry. We're using a more modern neoprene seal. Some of these were old rope seals. Oh, a couple of the crankshaft bolts, studs are in the way. And also the oil slinger. Don't know what that's all about. It should slide in. Another day. Oh, put the seal in backwards. It's alright. There we go, that's more like it. Go ahead and spin the crank. I'm just looking for that rear main, making sure it's okay. Alright. Go ahead and put it on the side here. And we're gonna leave these, them dry so we can put our plasti-gauge on there. Quick tip, try to buy some cheaper microfiber towels. If you use like the red shop towels like I use a lot, they leave lint behind, and if you use paper towels they can leave lint behind. So make sure you use a lint-free rag, especially on these essential components like this. Alright, so here's the plasti-gauge. It's just very thin strips of plastic. As you can see, come on, damn it. There we go. It's been a long day as normal. Maybe one day this will be my one job. Alright. So we got them on all the main caps. Go ahead and seat our front. Our middle. Got the new bearing installed. And make sure you always mark them, because you can put them either way during the disassembly. I put an X and an X, but it looks like somebody put some gold paint on there that I didn't notice before. So we're good. And also the numbers start here and go, you read them this way when you're facing the back of the engine. So and last but not least, the rear cap. And remember, don't put oil on these just yet. We don't want to oil on your caps. So we got that assembly lube on the bottom, just so we don't have to pull the crank again, and to simulate some of the oil tolerance a little bit. So he's going to get zipped down real quick, just finger tight, and then I'll go ahead and torque him to 65 foot-pounds. And then we'll take them off and check our plasti-gauge. Alright, so I'm going to torque them like we would. Do like a half on that one. Do a full here. Go to here. Just checking them again. I already had the urge to spin the crank, but so now we're gonna go ahead and start with the front. Alright, we got some squish in it. Some squish. And we'll put our scientific gauge on there. Make sure one bald eagles, it's got loser and bald eagles. So we're at about 1.5 thousandths. So 15 10,000. That's perfect. If you remember, the spec is 3 10,000ths to 29 10,000ths. So that's a huge range. It's almost 3 thousandths that you're allowed to go. So we'll just put this cap off to the side because we're going to clean that off. We're just going to keep on going down the line. Same thing. Yep, 1.5 thousand. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Perfect. And it's going to be a little tighter once there's some oil all around it. So we're going to be right in that Goldilocks range. It's going to be right in the middle. Not too tight, not too loose. Same thing, we'll go ahead and put that one off to the side. And then get the rear off. And yep, about 1.5. So we are good to go. So now I'm going to get this plastic gauge cleaned off. Go ahead and generously lubricate the crankshaft with just drown it in oil and assembly lube the bearings. And we'll give it a torque it down again. We'll give it a test spin. I'm going to flood the rear main seal because these do like to bind up during startup. So that's why it's important to clean this off real good, this slinger. Clean it off real good and make sure we lubricate it real good so it doesn't burn out. So it'll bind up and then overheat and burn out that seal, and it's just going to hemorrhage oil. Had that happen to me here on the MB. So, because I forgot that one step to flood it with oil. So, alright, let me get this all cleaned up. Alright, you can see all the assembly lube on there, on the bearing, on the cap, on the bearing I mean, cap. Go ahead and make sure they run down good by hand first, and we can just give them a little zip with the impact. I don't have all night. So for the final torque, I'm going to do half. So we're going to do just, we'll call it 30. Go ahead and do a 30 pass. So on the rear, I highly recommend putting some RTV. I recommend putting, hopefully, I don't know if it's in view or not. Damn camera tripod. There we go. I recommend putting some RTV on the back of the cap and where the rear main seal halves meet. Just a light dab. Now, I'm trying to remember if we can put the rear main packing in or if I have to pull the cap. I can't remember. I think we're going to find out here in just a second. Let me grab the packing. Yeah. Alright, let me remove the cap. I forgot. I got it on load. I can't remember everything. Stuff like this. I'm probably gonna have to redo my RTV. Alright, so before we get too crazy, just wanted to tell you that you do have to pull the crank again. I put the rear main seal in, half of it, and the other half, and the packing fought me, then got it all in, torqued down, and the crank would not budge at all. So I messed with the rear cap a few times, determined it was the rear cap. Long story short, the rear main seal was binding up pretty bad. I think this is the next day. I think I mentioned yesterday that they do bind up. Well, this one bound up pretty bad to the point where it didn't want to rotate. So I got the rear main seal completely removed. I spun the crank a few times with the rear main in there, you know, and all that, and recheck the bearing clearances, all that. Everything's fine. So as you can see, we're spinning nice. So we just have a little bit of drag from the assembly lube because it's so thick, and you know, our bearings aren't nothing's been spun or anything like that. So now the crank's moving freely, everything's good to go, everything's fine. So just remember, because I was out in the shop pretty late last night when I was filming the last scene and forgot how bad it binds up. So that being said, most likely I'm going to leave the rear main seal out until we get the pistons and connecting rods in, so I can do a test rotate, because it did not even want to rotate at all. Like, I was afraid I was going to snap the damn crankshaft. I was, you know, turning it so freaking hard on the end here, double nutted it and everything. So just something to not forget about, you know. But when we go to put that rear main seal back in, we'll make sure to just douse it in oil. A lot of assembly lube on the crank where the rear main seal rides, and then douse the rest of the seal in oil. I'm probably just going to let it sit in a cup of oil until we're ready to put it back in. It's not a neoprene seal. It's like a neoprene impregnated like rope fiber material. It's not a full neoprene seal, which is good. Normally you don't want to run a neoprene seal because they're so stiff that they don't really conform to the crankshaft really good, and that's where you get a lot of extra heat on the crank from friction, and then, you know, it'll eventually rupture the seal. So now that I'm fine, now that I know the crank's good, we're gonna go ahead and install the crank gear, and then do the cam timing on it, make sure the cam's in time with the crankshaft, and then we'll start putting in the pistons and rods. So no, one thing I forgot to mention too, when we were checking plasti-gauge, I was torquing the main caps kind of different. This last time around, I remember better ways to just do one at a time, and then make sure you're rotating the crankshaft. I mainly did that for test purposes, just to get our bearing clearances, but I didn't film the final torque, so I just started it in the middle, brought them down gradually, spun the crankshaft a couple rotations, made sure it wasn't in the same spot, torqued it down, and then same thing for the front, drew them down, and then torqued it. So, all right, so got the cam timing taken care of. Just install, normally you'd install the cam gear on how it goes in the book, but on this I left the cam gear on, so put the crank gear on. So it's possible to be 180 degrees out with this, because your cam's going to spend half the RPM or half your rotation of your crankshaft. So what you just want to do is, once you get it, you want to line up turn your cam to where both the lobes, both your intake and exhaust lobe on number 1 are going to be in neutral. Basically, there's going to be no lift on the tappets, and then also on your crank, 1 and 4 are going to be top dead, so it'll be at the top. And then go ahead and drive it. Go ahead and put it on. So next thing and last thing we're going to check for the crankshaft is end play. So once you get your gear on, you're going to go ahead and put your spacer on, your oil slinger, And your pulley, I intentionally left out the half moon key. The reason you want to put this on is because this is going to draw the crank and the gear together, and it's going to ride against the thrust bearing here. If you didn't tighten everything up, you'd have a ton of end play, and you think something was screwed up when all reality it's not. It's just not drawn together. So you got the new pulley, got a new nut. You can go ahead and zip it down real quick. Alright. And then I'm going to go ahead and set up the dial indicator. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and take the pulley off, because we got it zipped. Got it zipped down. In the book, it's having the dial indicator on the back flange of the engine. We can't access that with it on the engine stand. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it on the either here on the end of the crank or on the shoulder somewhere, and then we're just going to stick a pry bar and move the crank backwards and forwards and check our end play. Once I got the dial indicator set up, I did wind up putting the pulley back on with the nut, so it's drawing everything in and simulating everything put together. So I got the dial indicator just on the inside the nut on the crankshaft itself. So we got it zeroed. We're going to go ahead and go forward, see what it is. Double check that. It's not. It's a little loose. All right. So we got 9, 8, 7, 6. So we're about 6 1/4. Go ahead and go back. Hit it again. All right. Same thing. So we're within spec. Spec is 4 to 7 thousandths. So we are good on end play. If end play needed to be adjusted, there's a shim behind this washer here. They come in 2 thousandths thickness, so you just add however many shims you need to get your correct end play, and then put everything, tighten everything back, recheck end play. So we'll just go ahead and make sure it zeroes back out before I put everything away. Yep. See, it zeroed out. All right, cool. So now we're done with the crankshaft portion. So now we're going to go ahead and assemble the pistons and connecting rods, install those, and then move on from there.